So another day dawns for most of the world and will probably end for many of us still here. But I don't think we can say the same quite for the people in Ukraine, can we? As we look on in abject horror and amazement that Russia has attacked the Ukraine. And we're all looking and we're saying, well, most of the people from the West are saying that Russia is wrong, Putin is an imperialist, and he is wrong. He's becoming a little Napoleon. He's going to take over the world. And Putin's got a whole lot of reasons. Mostly, I think, to do with the fact that he's been, ringed by NATO alliances. And this is scary. But I think, is the problem simply as simple as that? Either he's an empire builder, or Ukraine is part of Russia, and we should just accept it, and the rest of the world should sit back. And I don't think it's as simple as that. I mean, if we look, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine started 1,000 years ago, when they were both pulled in under Kievan Rus by the Byzantine Empire, which obviously was a spring-off of the Holy Roman Empire. This was 1,000 years ago. And all of these were little feudal and little tribe chiefs and stuff scattered all over the place in Russia and down into Ukraine. And these were all incorporated into some kind of format of an empire, or a subsidiary of the empire, this Kievan Rus. But it was only following the Mongol invasion of Kievan Rus in about 1250 that the states of Ukraine and Russia in the north started to take shape. In the north, Russia, following the Mongol invasion, and when peace sort of descended vaguely again, Russia sort of pulled out all the chiefs and the leaders and the clans in the north and unified them into a sort of republic. And meanwhile, in the south, the Ukrainians were pulled by the duchy into the Duchy of Lithuania, which later became the Lithuania-Polish Commonwealth. So they were all pulled into the Commonwealth. So we eventually had a sort of a subdivision 800 years ago. That was when we first saw the division into sort of some kind of nationality. And an interesting part about the Commonwealth, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, is about 200-300 years later, about 1600, the Cossacks that eventually became Count Pushkin and all these vodka sort of figureheads and sort of the superheroes, they were in the south. They were in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. And they sided more with the Russian in the north. And so they started rebelling and fighting out, and eventually went to war. They started a war that was supported by Russia against the Commonwealth, and eventually they were united with Russia. So those two areas in the south, the Cossacks, but that was about 1600 AD. And then in the year about 1800, the Cossacks were kicked into touch completely. They were divided, and they were no longer a part of the Russian hierarchy or something, so to speak, although they're still legends in their own right. But we now started getting Ukraine and Russia starting to move forwards at the end of the 19th century. So then once the Cossacks were gone, even in that time, Ukraine started slowly being absorbed into the Russian Empire. Well, almost unnoticeably, I mean, if you look at history. But it started losing its own identity and being incorporated and being perceived so by the people around as part of Russia. Or Russia and Lithuania weren't separate, Ukraine weren't separate. They were all one sort of national entity. And besides a couple of separatists every now and again that were pushing for Ukraine, most people were pretty cool with it. They were quite happy, but still from Russia's side, they still wanted to, they were scared of any kind of national uprising or resistance, and they started a process that they call Russification, which were actual interventions made to give Ukrainian people more Russian identity. For instance, their language was curtailed, the spreading of books and stuff over time, over a long history of period, which took us almost right up until the First World War. This went lots of treaties backwards and forwards, but nothing insignificant. But there was a strange thing at the end of the First World War, wasn't it? It was crazy. The whole world was falling apart. Poland was smack in the middle of there. And here we have the Ukrainian-Polish Commonwealth. So we moved forward. And in 1918, eventually the Ukrainian People's Republic was declared. That's only around the corner. Eh? That's 1900 years. And this is where it gets very interesting, because now we've got Ukraine is independent, Russia's on their own, not happy about it. We've got the World War I has just ended, and it is the start of the USSR. The United Soviet Socialist Republic, the whole of Russia, what it was before. And Ukraine and Russia were both signing members for the initiation of the USSR. And interesting enough, in 1991, when it was disbanded, they were again signatories to the treaty, which resulted in the end of the USSR breaking apart. But now the USSR breaks apart. What happens next? We see all these little countries, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Bulgaria, etc., all the countries on the eastern bank, they start going and they start siding with NATO. And then in 2014, in Ukraine, the president at the time, Viktor Yanukovych or something, he decides he's not going to sign into law a selection by the majority of the Ukrainian government to actually push the interest more towards NATO and towards the EU. So let's just go through this carefully. I mean, 1,000 years ago, they were pulled together, united, all of the Russia into Ukraine area, and they were united into the Byzantine Empire. The Mongols come along, cause break things and everything goes mad, but they separate. Now we've got Russia in the northern territories, and we've got in the south, we've got the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. This starts, some guys in the Commonwealth decide they don't like it being, they like the Russian guys. So they start kicking and jumping up and down. So the Russians help them, and they sort of have wars. And then these guys say, no, we want to be part of Russia. So the Cossacks became part of Russia, and they're just united there. This goes backwards and forwards, wanting to split, comes to the First World War. All of a sudden, we get serious about this, and they break, and we have the independence, that it is now declared an independent country. And at the same time, just shortly after, it breaks into the Ukrainian War of Independence. And this linked to the Russian war, and now we've got loggerheads, and all of a sudden we're starting to find out that Ukraine has got value, okay, as financially and strategically, especially for Russia. Now Russia comes, USSR goes for war. The countries, the old Eastern Bloc countries on the western side of Russia, all side with NATO. NATO says, yeah, we're bringing freedom and we're bringing prosperity and democracy. And where is this anyway? Where's a country where there is freedom and democracy and prosperity? But not at the moment, not in the Western world. I mean, I don't know anywhere, but it is. Maybe Singapore. But that's not democracy, is it? And that works. But going back to Russia. So now Russia has a look at this and sees at this time in 2014 the dignity, revolution of dignity, which they call it, where this guy would not sign to go with NATO and EU, so they kicked him out. But now all of a sudden the Western world is saying, we're supporting the new guys because they're coming on us. So Putin is getting upset about that. He's saying, yeah, fuck, all these people are now siding with Ukraine. And there are vested interests. The pipeline feeding Europe with gas comes from Russia, who's the biggest supplier, through the Ukraine. So now we look at this situation, we say, okay, what is Putin's intention maybe? Well, if he's taking over Ukraine, please God, he doesn't go on what we know from history is a fact. If you want to change the country, you cannot just destroy the infrastructure and put key personnel in place and run it. Because there would be discontent. People would have got killed. People would have been annihilated, tortured, murdered, whatever. And now they're going to be back in the same places. You cannot do that. If you want to change a country, take ownership, go in there and kill everyone. Then you can put it in your place. There's no resistance. There's no residual memory. And you can start changing things seriously. Please, God, let Putin not be chasing annihilation, but it is a possibility. And then let's look at the response of the NATO. First of all, obviously the arms build-up on Russia's western frontier. But more significantly, their arms pipeline. And the speech by some English minister yesterday was talking, I think it was Minister of Defence, I think, I can't even remember. I'm not good with names, not even faces, just the words. Anyway, he was talking about the pipeline and saying we cannot allow this to dominate Europe, this power of Russia to dominate. Now, these speeches are surely prepared, so they can think of the consequence. So that the same as 2 nights ago, following the announcement of Russia speaking of Vala and all history and stuff, I knew they were going to raid last night. And if these guys are speaking about now that we cannot allow this port pipeline, the ownership and management of this pipeline to exist in the present conditions, state, what is he saying? Are they wanting to wrestle the pipeline control from Russia? Is this where this is possibly going? That we are talking, one side is thinking of annihilation, the ground forces on the ground. They are walking in there. And now we're talking another strategically for a pipeline. And these are their chess games. But who owns the property? Who owns it? From 1,000 years ago, it's been backwards and forwards, been Russia and things. But surely we are looking at it wrong on what our leaders are supposed to be doing to us, doing for us. They are not supposed to be making wars, and this is any leader. Surely we are looking at it wrong. We are lying, we're giving them the power of politics and the power of finance and power of everything to control our lives. But we're not looking at them and saying, how are you enriching my community, my bunch of houses, people that I live around? And how are you making me make peace with other little communities which still fall under your jurisdiction? So we're not at each other's loggerheads. And what justifies a reason for Russia to take ownership of things just on historical grounds, or is the will of the people? I don't think Russia is very much like Africa, or South Africa, where the population differences were immense. I think it's probably closer to Ireland, isn't it? Hey? Some of those kind of situations where there's strong support on both sides. And the only way we can put this thing away is by letting these people kill each other, and the rest of the world standing around like bettors, like gamblers, above a dog pit. And we throw these 2 dogs into the thing, and they say, hoi. But except we haven't thrown 2 dogs. We've taken a little obnoxious fox terrier, and we've thrown it in there with a fucking bear. Okay, and now they're saying you will not get away with it, and threatening Putin. In other words, not even give yourself the dignity of a back door to say, well, we'll give you very strong sanctions. Meanwhile, they were saying to Ukraine a little while ago, you go, boy, we got your back. On paper, war is a different thing, and Putin knows this. He knows he can push the button. This war did not start 2 days ago. It's going into summer in the Northern Hemisphere. It gives him 6 months, 7 months, 8 months to fight without going into bad weather. This thing has been orchestrated and planned. And America and the rest of the world were sitting in their fucking high horses saying, well, we're gonna, yeah. Instead of saying, hey, maybe we should think about taking these guns. We can hit him from the States anyway if we want to. Maybe with the whole of the Western Front, this whole, display of aggression and of arms is short-sighted. The days of threatening countries into submission are gone. It's an era of not even diplomacy, it's a fucking brains thinking. And thinking of outcomes. What outcomes do we want? Not who should win the brownie points. This is serious stuff, man. This is going to impact on the whole world. And we say, yeah, wonder who's right now, fucking communists and Biden, the old fart. And we sit and look, and we're betting our money on these people to either allow our planet to carry on existing or to disappear. Get fucked up. Your kids, man. Our kids going to war. 600,000, all the guys, males 18 to 60 in Ukraine have been called up to fight the Russians, the army, when they've been watching. And so you're saying to all your folk, guys, please stand up here to die. Because it's not a war that can be won by military intervention, not from Ukraine, not from the world. And what's going to happen to the rest of the world? Are you going to start sending guns? First there will be guns, that'll be man on the ground. First man on the ground that gets killed, Putin will turn around and all we think will hit that country. Maybe it's too clever. I think he's very clever, but he's a cold, calculating man. He's not a prima donna. And this is danger. He sees he's justified because of history to take Ukraine. But if it was done correctly, all sides should benefit. And it shouldn't be the state that is benefiting. It should be the people of the region. The same as in America. The same as in South Africa. The same on the whole fucking planet. That we say they're fighting for us and they annihilate xenophobia, rob, pillage, break shit. And we sit back and we go, they are men. Fuck. Which politician is your man? Hey, which guy do you think has got integrity first of the country and his people and the people of the country, any country? That guy in Peru, I think he was, that drove the Forksy, the president, maybe. But all of these well-dressed motherfuckers going and hanging out in conference rooms and flitting around the world to save us people. Guess what? Take the money that you're using, 100 billion in job creation. We're going to create jobs. What kind of fucking jobs? Take 100 billion, no, we can't, 30 and 70. And take that and divide that by, and the money to run the manpower development. Take all that box, say 200 billion, and just divide it by 25 million. And see how much money you could give every person in the country without having to try and create jobs for nothing. We are looking at the questions wrong. We're asking the wrong questions. We just accepting. We become apathetic. We become lazy. We turn blind eyes to shit. When people are raping our families, we rather not comment because people think bad of us. And I'm talking figuratively. I'm talking about society of humanity. We need to get balls back, folks. And I'm not going to war, but to fucking think. To think and act, to get people, hold people accountable for good, through peace, through love. This concept of love is thrown around so flippantly. I love sunshine. Oh, we love you, brother. Come around, come to my door, I'll make you coffee if you're in the area. Someone's thinking, what cuck? Hey? And we talk this shit. Let's get real with life and learn what love is. And love is compassion and tolerance and understanding. An idea to understand, not just get your way. I think this is a lot more complicated. I really do, and I think we need to do a lot better. But going back to this Ukraine and Russia, it's not who's right or wrong. It's how do we move forward from here, and how do we support both sides, the people that, because it's all tied to fear, Russian fear of the whole of NATO and EU and states, and the rest of the world from this big bad bear. If we didn't think all of this and we couldn't talk, and maybe we shouldn't let politicians talk for us. We should send their wives or their kids, even better, to talk for us, because this is bullshit that we get pulled into this fucking shit all the time by politicians who push a button and sign a piece of paper and people die. That is wrong, man. No, bad. I hope it comes out good, and I pray for them. Have a lekker day.